A humanitarian crisis is defined as an incident or series of events that endanger the health, safety, or well-being of a sizable population. War, natural disasters, famine, and/or the spread of infectious diseases can all result in humanitarian crises. Children suffer horrendous physical, psychological, and social effects from humanitarian crises. We must not lose sight of the humanitarian crises affecting children around the world while the world's focus is on Ukraine. Conflict, food insecurity, and climate change have made it imperative for mankind to pay heed, from Somalia to Venezuela. Today we have focused these topics. Don't forget to give your feedback. An unprecedented food crisis in Afghanistan has been brought on by the country's economic collapse and the lingering effects of the drought from the previous year. The majority of families have lost some or all of their salaries, making it difficult for them to afford the rising cost of food.
He says, "I need food. I have 5 kids. They're also hungry."
As the war in Ukraine drives up the price of goods globally, there is a chance that Afghanistan's cost of living could increase much more. After nations and international financial organizations withdrew financing and frozen Afghanistan assets in the wake of last year's leadership shift, the foreign help that previously kept Afghanistan afloat has taken a while to resume. Tragically, parents will agree to sell one child in order to keep the other one alive.
Some parents are doing the unthinkable. It's normally the girls who are sold first, and when the pangs of hunger become too much to bear, some families sell their little boys too.
Since August 2021, there may have been 121,000 child exchanges across the nation. Over 2 decades of conflict and political unrest have plagued the unstable Democratic Republic of the Congo, resulting in one of the biggest and most complicated humanitarian catastrophes in history. The DRC has one of the worst health systems in the world, which has been made worse by the nation's struggles with Ebola, cholera, COVID-19, and the 2021 volcanic eruption. There are over 27 million people that are severely food insecure. More than any other African nation, an astounding 5 million people are internally displaced as a result of armed war, racial unrest, and land disputes. With increased assertiveness and impatience of the grassroots youth movement for whom Greta Thunberg is the flag bearer, the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow in November was a high point for young action. Children stand to lose the most from adult inaction in the face of an emerging catastrophe because the pledges made by world leaders in Glasgow are inadequate for the work at hand. Everyone will be watching COP27 to see if leaders can turn the blah 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 of Glasgow into effective action to safeguard the destinies of children. The humanitarian catastrophe in Venezuela has worsened after nearly 7 years of economic contraction, political unrest, and violent crime. After the war in Syria, more than 5.6 million Venezuelans have left their homes, making this the second largest exodus in history. However, current refugee crisis differs from others in that it is not the product of a traditional war or battle. Due to skyrocketing inflation, unemployment, and a lack of accessible food, water, energy, and health care, Venezuela's economy has come dangerously close to collapsing, driving families to seek refuge in neighboring nations. The problem has been compounded by the pandemic and the ongoing political and economic difficulties within and outside of Venezuela. With overburdened healthcare institutions, rising rates of poverty, and deteriorating conditions in education, food security, and health, the rising number of COVID-19 cases continues to endanger Venezuelans. Today, more kids are being forcibly relocated than at any point since World War II. The number of children subject to UNHCR mandate increased from 4 million to almost 10 million between 2005 and 2020. Public opinion is frequently affected by images of children crossing borders or dying in the process, and policies are occasionally changed as a result. In 2022, the issue will be whether youngsters can anticipate being confronted with rods or ropes as they travel towards safety, given the continued influx of desperate families seeking refuge. Over the past 30 years, child mortality rates have decreased significantly, decreasing by roughly 60% since 1990. However, the COVID-19 pandemic's unprecedented demands on the world's health resources have led to the resurgence of diseases that had been on the decline. Since the start of the epidemic, malaria deaths, which had been on a long-term declining trajectory, have surged in 32 nations. There is a strong likelihood that child mortality will rise in 2022 for the first time in decades, which would be a catastrophe for children's health worldwide. However, recent developments, like the creation of the first malaria vaccine to be truly effective, give reason for optimism that the pandemic's influence on vaccine development will eventually be to children's long-term advantage. More than 90 out of every 1,000 children in South Sudan die before they turn 5, making it one of the countries with the highest child mortality rates in the world. 1 million children in South Sudan are currently on the verge of hunger due to a sharp rise in food insecurity that shows no indications of abating. The region has been devastated by recent extreme flooding, intercommunal conflict, the COVID-19 pandemic's effects, and general economic degradation. 6.5 million people are experiencing a serious food crisis as a result of the loss of crops, animals, homes, and access to health care. Ethiopian children are currently dealing with never-before-seen difficulties. Desert locust infestations, significant flooding, and other climatic crises had severely affected the area. Over 1.7 million people have been displaced due to the fighting in the Tigray region. There are still 5.2 million people who require help. As a result of the fighting in Tigray, a concerning number of children are currently living apart from their parents, many of them are living in perilous informal camps. The conflict in northeastern Nigeria is becoming worse. A terrible attack on a secondary school in northwest Nigeria heralded the end of 2020. Sadly, there has been an increase in the recruitment of young people by armed groups in the Sahel. Children are struggling to survive because the health and education systems are already in disaster. Iraq has seen decades of war and pervasive violence, making it one of the 5 worst places for children to live in a battle zone. An unprecedented 3 million Iraqis, over half of whom are children, have been forced to leave their homes due to violence. Several official IDP camps in Iraq were abruptly shut down in the latter part of 2020, forcing thousands of people to live among unexploded bombs and wreckage in deserted regions.